course, was the commander of the Apollo 10 mission and is now chief of the astronaut office at the Manned Spacecraft Center. I understand that in order to keep up with the mission, we'll have to relinquish our time back to the air-ground at 45 minutes past the hour. So this will probably be about a 15-minute job. I'm going to ask Mr. Caprian to bring us up to date on the countdown activities, and I think Colonel Stafford also will have some brief comments. We'll go into questions, and then we'll have to terminate at that time. Mr. Caprian?
Okay, since we want to make this short and sweet, I'm not going to talk about the problem we had with the hydrogen tank the last day and a half, but I'll just get into the terminal count itself. As most of you know, the count proceeded very nominally. The only problems that we encountered were, number one, at T-minus 6 hours and 35 minutes, we did have a failure of a ramp generator, which was required for making some flight controls checks. It was a piece of GSE, not flight equipment. As a result of that, we had to make a pad entry under cryogenic conditions, and we were able to do that successfully. We were able to replace a card in the generator that had an amplifier that had gone bad, and were able to get out of that problem without any real difficulty, except that the IBM troops had to extend their flight controls checks into the built-in hole that we had set up at T-minus 3 hours and 30 minutes. The only other problem we had of any significance was at about T-minus 40 minutes, we lost one of our LOX replenish pumps, and of course we have a redundant system there. We were able to switch to that redundant pump and continue the countdown. As far as the hardware is concerned and the count itself is concerned, it was a very nominal count. We did have the consideration of the weather, of course, that caused us quite a bit of concern. Now, as most of you know, we do have launch mission rules that set up the ground rules and the criteria for our launch operation. And we've worked for many years to give ourselves a vehicle and a complex and a set of ground rules that would enable us to fly a good mission under as taxing conditions as was possible, knowing that we were going to have very stringent lunar window commitments to meet. As long as we had the 2' radars and beacon number, C-band beacon number 1 in the IU operating, from the standpoint of hardware, we had no restriction whatsoever as far as visibility or ceiling was concerned. We do have a 500-foot ceiling limitation for launch site recovery. At the time of liftoff, the ceiling was 1,000 feet. We were within our minimums. We had designed the spacecraft and the launch vehicle so that we could launch in the rain. We have always intended to launch in the rain if that was necessary in order to meet our window. The only consideration as far as launching under what apparently are adverse conditions they are really twofold. Number one, we would not launch into a thundercloud. Number two, we would not launch when we had lightning in the system. There was some concern. We had very unpredictable weather predictions. The weather was deteriorating, improving, deteriorating. We were in constant touch with the weather office. We contacted the Eastern Test Range and scrambled an Araya aircraft to fly in this general area. The report that came back was there was only mild turbulence, that we broke clear at altitudes somewhat less than 23,000 feet, and there was no indication of lightning within 20 miles of the pad area. I did give very strong consideration to holding at T-minus 22 minutes, which is a point in the count where we could have an indefinite hold. However, in view of the fact that the weather predictions were as unpredictable as they were. And once we got the report back from the orbiting aircraft that we did not have an electrical potential, all of our minimums were satisfied. We therefore decided to proceed with the launch as scheduled, and we did do. And of course, we feel that we are en route to a successful mission, with TLI planned for 2 hours and 47 minutes after liftoff, and that is still our plan. Now, we did have, at approximately 35 or 36 seconds after liftoff, we experienced a transient that overloaded the fuel cells and caused them to go off the line. Now, once this was done, the entry batteries in the command module took over the system. However, they are operating at a lower voltage than the fuel cells do, and as a result of that, we had a temporary, momentary loss of certain of the equipment in the spacecraft. We have since getting into orbit made systems checks, and every system that we have checked seems to be working perfectly, and our present plan is to perform TLI as scheduled. I guess that's all I have to say in the way of a general statement.
Thank you, Walt. Tom, do you have a comment?
Well, we kept the crew advised completely on the launch countdown status, all the factors of the weather, and at the time when they lost the 3 fuel cells and the 2 AC buses in the spacecraft, a lot of lights come on and the warning sounds go off. I think Pete, Conrad, and the whole crew should be really commended for keeping a cool head there and reacting just like they should, since our own instrument unit went out and started to spin on him. However, he was looking at the rate gyros as the backup instrument, made his own analysis real fast, and said, let's press right. At that time, then Al Bean was able to reset the fuel cells, and by the time that they got past staging, they had the AC buses back on the line working 1, 2, 3, 4. I think this also brings out the point that when everything just went boom like that suddenly, as far as the loss of power and all the other indications, is an example of why we have experienced test pilots flying these vehicles. The latest information, everything looks good. Dick Gordon had the platform realigned as soon as they hit darkness over Africa, started it, and they came into darkness at 32 minutes. All the systems looks good. We've run a series test besides what's normally done. Everything looks great, and it looks like we'll all go for TLI.
Okay, before I mentioned 15 minutes, we understand from Houston that they'll be coming up with air ground at 45 minutes past the hour on the Australian Pass. Now, if you people want to continue this conference, this means we would not receive the information from Houston. It would be taped and passed on. Now, do you want to do that, or do you want to terminate and hear the pass? We've still got about 5 minutes. I'm trying to point out we'll be glad to try to answer more questions, but we can't interfere with the mission at the same time. We've got about 3 minutes left. We'll take Mr. Partner over here.
I'd like to ask 2 quick questions. First, Conrad says he thinks it was hit by lightning. And do you agree that that would cause this boom that you talk about, Tom? The second is, will this outage affect the lunar module?
Well, first of all, I think it's only speculation. The Saturn right now, the data in the Saturn instrument unit did not show any glitches at all, and it's only speculation. Vibration as you go out could have unseated a relay.